She quit her job. Then a billionaire, CEO, came to her door and said, "I accepted you quitting, but not losing you." She quit her job. Then a billionaire CEO came to her door and said, "I accepted you quitting, but not losing you." The golden morning light filtered through the towering glass windows of Metrotech's headquarters as Ella stepped into the sleek lobby. Her heels clicked against the polished marble floor, each step feeling heavier than the last. The security guard, Mike, gave her his usual friendly nod, but even returning his smile felt like an effort today. "Morning, Miss Thompson," he called out. "Another early start?" "As always, Mike," she replied, adjusting the strap of her designer laptop bag on her shoulder. The elevator ride to the 47th floor was a familiar routine. Ella watched her reflection in the mirrored walls, noting the subtle dark circles under her eyes that even her expensive concealer couldn't quite hide. Her tailored navy suit and perfectly styled hair couldn't mask the exhaustion that had become her constant companion. Her phone buzzed. Another urgent email from the marketing team about the upcoming product launch. 3 more buzzed before she even reached her floor. Ella's stomach tightened as she scrolled through them, each one adding another item to her endless to-do list. The office was already humming with activity despite the early hour. Sarah, her assistant, intercepted her before she could reach her office door. "Your 9 a.m. called to move up to 8:30, and development needs the quarterly projections by noon instead of end of day," Sarah rattled off, following Ella into her corner office. "Also, Mr. Chen from Singapore is waiting for your call. He says it's urgent." Ella set her things down on her glass desk, the city sprawling out beyond her window. "When did Mr. Chen call?" "About an hour ago. He's been quite insistent." Taking a deep breath, Ella nodded. "Okay, get him on the line. And can you grab me a coffee? Extra shot today." The morning dissolved into a blur of back-to-back meetings. In the brief moments between calls, Ella found herself staring at her computer screen, the numbers and projections swimming before her eyes. Her head throbbed, and the tension in her shoulders had become a constant companion. During a quick lunch break, really just 10 minutes to wolf down a salad at her desk, Ella's mother called. She let it go to voicemail, like the last 3 times. She couldn't remember the last time she'd had a real conversation with her family, or spent an evening with friends without checking her phone every few minutes. The afternoon board meeting was the final straw. For 3 hours, she presented marketing strategies and defended budget proposals. Her voice steady even as exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her. The fluorescent lights seemed too bright, the air too thin. As the other executives filed out, discussing dinner reservations at exclusive restaurants, Ella remained in her chair. The sun had set, painting the sky in deep purples and oranges. The city lights were beginning to twinkle, thousands of tiny stars in a concrete galaxy. She stood up slowly and walked back to her office, each step feeling like she was moving through water. Sitting at her desk, Ella looked around at the trappings of her success: the industry awards on the shelves, the designer furniture, the view that so many envied. Yet all she felt was emptiness. Her computer screen glowed with unread emails. Her phone buzzed with messages and notifications. The weight of it all, the constant demands, the endless meetings, the pressure to always be on, pressed down on her chest until she could barely breathe. Ella's hands trembled slightly as she opened her laptop. Instead of responding to emails or reviewing reports, she opened a blank document. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment before she began typing. "Dear Mr. Davidson, I am writing to formally submit my resignation." The words flowed easily, as if they'd been waiting to be written for months. Perhaps they had been. As Ella typed, she felt something shift inside her. Fear, yes, but also relief. like taking off a pair of shoes that had been pinching her feet for too long. The city lights continued to multiply in the darkening sky, but for the first time in years, Ella felt like she could finally see clearly. Ella's fingers moved across the keyboard with surprising steadiness, despite her racing heart. The quiet hum of the office's climate control system was the only sound accompanying the soft tapping of keys. Outside her window, the city lights twinkled against the dark sky, a view she'd once considered a symbol of her success. I hereby tender my resignation, effective 2 weeks from today. She paused, taking a deep breath. The words on her screen made it real. Too real. Her mouse cursor blinked steadily at the end of the sentence, waiting for more. The designer desk clock, a gift from the board last Christmas, showed 8:47 p.m. Most of her colleagues had left hours ago, leaving the office floor in that peculiar after-hours stillness that made even the smallest sounds seem amplified. Ella glanced at the framed achievements on her wall. Awards, certificates, magazine features celebrating her meteoric rise in the corporate world. Each one had felt like a victory when she received it. Now they felt more like shackles, golden though they might be. Her phone buzzed again. Another email, another demand for her attention. She ignored it, focusing instead on completing the letter. The words came easier now, flowing from some deep well of certainty she hadn't known existed until this moment. While I am grateful for the opportunities for growth and development that have been provided to me during the last 5 years. Running her fingers through her hair, Ella leaned back in her ergonomic chair. Her reflection in the window looked both familiar and strange. The perfect corporate uniform, the careful makeup, the straight posture that spoke of years of board meetings and presentations. But her eyes held something different now. Determination. Maybe even hope. She finished the letter, reading it over twice to ensure it struck the right tone. Professional, grateful, but firm. Her finger hovered over the print button for several long moments before she finally pressed it. The office printer whirred to life, its sound oddly loud in the quiet space. Walking to the printer felt like crossing a threshold. Each step carried the weight of decision, of change, of no turning back. The paper was still warm when she picked it up, the ink fresh and dark against the crisp white page. Her signature at the bottom looked bold, decisive. Ella's heels clicked against the floor as she made her way to her boss's office. Mr. Davidson was still there, as she'd known he would be. He always worked late, a habit she'd once admired and tried to emulate. He looked up as she knocked on his door frame, his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. "Ella, I thought you'd left hours ago." "No, sir, She stepped into his office, the letter feeling heavy in her hands. "I needed to give you this." Mr. Davidson took the paper, his expression changing as he read. His eyebrows rose, then furrowed, then rose again. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the soft rustling of paper as he turned the page over, as if expecting to find more on the back. Are you serious about this, Ella?" He looked up at her, genuine surprise in his eyes. "You're one of our top executives. We were planning to promote you to senior vice president by year's end." "I know, sir, and I'm grateful, truly. But—" Ella squared her shoulders, standing firm. "This is something I need to do." He studied her face for a long moment, then slowly nodded. "I can't say I'm not disappointed. You're an asset to this company, Ella, but—" He sighed, setting the letter down on his desk. "If this is what you really want, I'll accept your resignation." "Thank you, sir." The words came out steady, though her heart was pounding. "Do you have another position lined up?" "No, sir. I just need a change." He nodded again, looking somewhat bewildered but resigned. "Well, you know we'll give you an excellent reference, wherever you go next." Ella felt lighter with each step as she walked back to her office. The weight she'd been carrying for so long was lifting, replaced by a mix of liberation and nervous energy. She gathered her purse and coat, taking one last look at the office that had been her second home for so many years. The morning sun cast long shadows across Ella's bedroom as she methodically folded her clothes into neat piles. Her once pristine corporate wardrobe, the tailored suits, pressed blouses, and designer heels, remained hanging in the closet. Instead, she packed comfortable sweaters, well-worn jeans, and casual dresses that hadn't seen daylight in years. Her apartment, a luxury high-rise with floor-to-ceiling windows and modern furnishings, felt sterile now. The carefully curated decor that had once made her proud now seemed like props in a play she'd been performing for far too long. "Just the essentials," she reminded herself, running her fingers over a soft cotton sweater before adding it to her suitcase. The rest would go into storage until she figured out her next move. Each item she chose to take felt like a deliberate step toward her new life. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, another message from her former colleagues, probably expressing disbelief at her sudden departure. She left it face down, focusing instead on the task at hand. The choice of what to bring and what to leave behind felt strangely therapeutic. After loading the last box into her car, Ella took one final walk through her apartment. The morning light streamed through the windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. She'd lived here for 5 years, but somehow it felt like she'd never really made it home. The drive out of the city started in typical morning traffic, but as skyscrapers gave way to suburbs and suburbs to rolling countryside, Ella felt the tension in her shoulders beginning to ease. She lowered her windows, letting the fresh spring air rush in. The playlist she'd made for the journey, filled with songs she'd loved in college but hadn't had time to listen to in years, provided a soundtrack for her escape. The highway curved along the coastline, offering glimpses of the ocean between hills and trees. Each mile marker felt like another step away from spreadsheets, deadlines, and midnight emails. Her grip on the steering wheel loosened, and she caught herself smiling more than once at nothing in particular. Around noon, she pulled into a small roadside diner. Instead of rushing through lunch while checking emails, she savored a home-style burger and actually tasted her coffee. The waitress called her "honey" and asked about her drive, and Ella found herself engaging in an actual conversation. Not networking, not negotiating, just talking. Back on the road, the scenery grew increasingly coastal. Salt-weathered buildings replaced steel and glass structures. Palm trees swayed in the ocean breeze, and seabirds wheeled overhead. The GPS guided her through narrow streets lined with local shops and cafes, each one looking more inviting than the last. The beach house she'd rented appeared exactly as it had in the photos, a weathered blue cottage with white trim and a wraparound porch. Climbing wooden steps worn smooth by years of sandy feet, Ella unlocked the door with the key she'd found under the turtle-shaped door knocker. Inside, sunlight filtered through gauzy curtains, creating patterns on the wooden floors. The furniture was mismatched but comfortable looking, with squashy armchairs and a couch draped in soft throws. No chrome, no leather, no stark minimalist designs, just cozy, lived-in charm. Through the back windows, she could see the ocean, its waves rolling endlessly toward the shore. The sound of surf filtered through the screens, along with the cry of seagulls and the rustling of palm fronds in the breeze. Ella set her bags down and walked to the back door, stepping onto a deck that overlooked the beach. The air was thick with salt spray, and the scent of tropical flowers from the small garden below. A wooden swing hung from the porch roof, gently swaying in the breeze. For the first time in years, she took a deep breath that didn't feel constricted by deadlines or expectations. The weight of corporate responsibility, of constant connectivity, of never-ending pressure to perform, it all seemed to dissolve in the ocean air. Ella stood in the middle of her new living room, surrounded by boxes and bags. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the beach house windows, creating a warm, golden glow that made even the cardboard boxes look somehow charming. She reached into the nearest one, pulling out a framed photo of her family at the beach from years ago, back when vacations weren't interrupted by urgent emails and conference calls. "Perfect spot," she murmured, placing it on a weathered wooden shelf near the window. Unlike her former apartment's rigid organizational system, she allowed herself to arrange things wherever they felt right. Her coffee maker found its home on a rustic kitchen counter beside a window overlooking the garden. Her books, mostly untouched for the past few years, spread across built-in shelves, their colorful spines bringing life to the white walls. The beach house came partially furnished, with comfortable, lived-in pieces that told stories of countless summer vacations. A plush armchair with slight wear on the arms sat in a corner perfect for reading. The dining table, though small, had enough room for 4 and bore the marks of many shared meals. After an hour of unpacking, Ella changed into a pair of worn jeans and a comfortable sweater, clothes that had been buried in the back of her closet during her corporate days. She slipped her feet into sandals, grabbed her phone more out of habit than necessity, and headed for the beach. The wooden steps from her back deck led directly to a narrow path through seagrass and dunes. As she walked, the soft sand shifted beneath her feet, and the tension she'd been carrying in her shoulders began to melt away. The ocean stretched endlessly before her, waves rolling in with a steady rhythm that seemed to sync with her heartbeat. Ella walked along the waterline, letting the cool water lap at her feet. She picked up shells, examining their shapes and colors before either keeping them or tossing them back into the surf. No deadline pressure, no performance metrics, no quarterly reports, just the simple pleasure of beachcombing. A group of seagulls scattered as she approached, and she watched them wheel away against the cloud-streaked sky. In the distance, she could see other beachgoers, a couple walking their dog, children building sandcastles, an elderly man reading in a beach chair. Everyone seemed to move at a slower, more deliberate pace here. After walking for about half an hour, Ella turned back toward town, following a wooden boardwalk that led to the main street. Small shops lined both sides of the road, their weathered signs and window displays a far cry from the sleek boutiques she was used to in the city. A bell chimed as she pushed open the door to Sandy's Seaside Market, a corner store with baskets of fresh produce displayed outside. The interior smelled of coffee and fresh-baked bread, with wooden shelves stocked with both everyday necessities and local specialties. "Welcome in," called a warm voice. A woman in her 50s emerged from behind the counter, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a casual braid. "You must be the one who rented the blue cottage on Shell Road. I'm Sandy. This is my place." "I'm Ella," she replied, surprised by the immediate recognition. "How did you know?" Sandy laughed, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "Small town, honey. Word travels fast when someone new moves in. Plus, I saw you walking up from the beach. Only the Blue Cottage folks use that particular path." As Sandy showed her around the store, pointing out local favorites and sharing bits of town history, Ella found herself relaxing into the conversation. Unlike the carefully calculated networking she was used to, this interaction felt genuine and unhurried. "We do a little community breakfast here on Sunday mornings," Sandy mentioned, bagging up some fresh fruit Ella had selected. "Nothing fancy, just coffee, pastries, and good company. You should join us this weekend if you're up for it. Looking around at the cozy store, with its mix of practical items and charming local touches, Ella felt a spark of excitement about the possibility of becoming part of this community. This wasn't just an escape from her old life. It was the beginning of something new. The morning sun painted golden streaks across Ella's porch as she settled into a worn Adirondack chair, wrapping her hands around a steaming mug of coffee. The ocean breeze carried the salt-tinged air, so different from the sterile atmosphere of her former office. She had traded designer suits for soft cotton pants and an oversized sweater, her previously perfectly styled hair now loose and natural. Her phone lay face down on the small table beside her, deliberately ignored. For the first time in years, she didn't feel compelled to check her emails before sunrise. Instead, she watched seabirds glide over the waves, their calls mixing with the rhythmic sound of the surf. Taking a slow sip of her coffee, Ella closed her eyes, savoring the moment of peace. No urgent meetings, no crisis management, no... The sound of footsteps on the wooden steps made her eyes snap open. Her breath caught in her throat as she recognized the tall figure ascending her porch stairs. Noah Sterling, CEO of Sterling Technologies and her former boss, stood before her in a casual blazer and jeans, a far cry from his usual impeccable suits. "Good morning, Ella," he said, his deep voice carrying the same quiet authority she remembered from countless board meetings. But something was different. There was an uncertainty in his stance that she'd never seen before. Ella's hands tightened around her coffee mug. "Mr. Sterling," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. What are you doing here?" "Noah, please," he corrected gently, running a hand through his slightly disheveled dark hair. "May I?" He gestured to the empty chair beside her. Still stunned, Ella nodded. Noah settled into the chair, his tall frame making it look almost comically small. For a moment they sat in silence, watching the waves crash against the shore. "I read your resignation letter," he finally said, his eyes fixed on the horizon. 3 times, actually. Ella shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "I assumed HR would have processed it by now." "They have." Noah turned to face her, his expression unreadable. But something about it kept nagging at me. Between the lines of that perfectly composed letter, I could see exhaustion, burnout, things I should have noticed long before it came to this. The morning breeze picked up, carrying the sound of distant seagulls. Ella's coffee had grown cold, forgotten in her hands. "I watched you push yourself harder than anyone else," Noah continued, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. 60-hour weeks, weekends, always the first to arrive and last to leave. I admired your dedication, your drive, but I never expected you to reach a breaking point. "I didn't either," Ella admitted, setting down her mug. "Until suddenly, I couldn't remember the last time I'd slept through the night or had dinner without answering emails. The success, the promotions, they started feeling hollow." Noah nodded slowly, his shoulders carrying a weight she hadn't noticed before. "I understand more than you might think." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I've been where you are, Ella. The difference is, I never had the courage to step away, to choose myself over the company." His admission hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken understanding. Ella studied his profile, seeing for the first time the faint lines of fatigue around his eyes, the slight slump in his usually perfect posture. "When you handed in your resignation," he said, "I respected your decision, but I couldn't accept losing one of the most talented executives I've ever worked with without at least acknowledging that I saw your struggles, that I should have done something sooner." The words settled over Ella like a gentle wave, washing away the last remnants of anxiety she'd carried about her decision to leave. Here was Noah Sterling, the man she'd spent years trying to impress, admitting he'd seen her drowning and understanding why she had to swim away. The wooden porch creaked softly as Noah shifted in his chair, his gaze drifting between Ella and the rolling waves beyond. The morning sun had risen higher now, casting long shadows across the weathered deckboards. A gentle breeze carried the scent of sea salt and distant pine, so different from the sterile air of their old office building. "Do you remember the Peterson account?" Noah asked suddenly, breaking the contemplative silence. 2 years ago, when everyone said it was impossible to land? Ella nodded, memories of endless strategy sessions and late nights flooding back. 3 months of preparation. The board thought we were wasting our time. But you saw something nobody else did, Noah continued, a hint of admiration in his voice. You recognized their expansion patterns, predicted their needs before they even knew they had them. He smiled, shaking his head slightly. I watched you present that proposal. 30 minutes of pure brilliance. You didn't just land the account. You transformed how we approached every major client afterward. Ella felt her cheeks warm at the praise. It was just good research and... It was exceptional, Noah interrupted gently. Just like your handling of the merger last year and the sustainability initiative you spearheaded 6 months ago. He turned to face her fully. I've been watching your career, Ella, not just as your boss, but as someone who recognized a kindred spirit. The admission surprised her. She'd always seen Noah as somewhat removed, existing in a different sphere entirely. A kindred spirit? Someone who sees beyond the obvious, who understands that business isn't just about profit margins and quarterly reports. His expression softened. Someone who cares about making a real difference. A seagull called overhead, drawing their attention momentarily to the sky. Ella wrapped her sweater tighter around herself, processing his words. I never told you this, Noah continued, his voice taking on a more personal tone. But I started following your career even before you joined Sterling Technologies. Your marketing strategies at your previous company caught my attention. The way you integrated community outreach with business development, it was innovative, compassionate. Ella blinked in surprise. You knew about that? Noah nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. I may have fast-tracked your application when you applied to Sterling. The hiring committee thought you were too young for the executive position, but I knew they were wrong. The revelation stunned her. All this time, she'd thought she'd fought her way up entirely on her own merit, unnoticed until she'd proven herself. Your work ethic, your integrity, your vision, they're rare qualities, Ella, especially in our industry. Noah paused, seeming to weigh his next words carefully. That's actually part of why I'm here. He stood up, walking to the porch railing. The morning light caught the silver at his temples, highlighting the distinguished appearance that had earned him the nickname the Silver Fox among junior staff members. For the past year, I've been working on something new, something different. He turned back to face her, his expression earnest. A technology initiative that could revolutionize sustainable energy distribution in rural communities, the kind of project that could make a real difference. Ella felt her pulse quicken despite herself. This was the Noah Sterling she'd glimpsed occasionally in board meetings. Passionate, visionary, driven by more than just profit. The project headquarters, he continued, is right here in this coastal town. That's not a coincidence, Ella. When I heard about your move, I knew it was time to approach you with this. He moved back to his chair, leaning forward slightly. I'm not here to drag you back to your old life. I'm here to offer you something new, a partnership. Equal stake, equal say, but on your terms. A chance to make the kind of impact you've always wanted to make, without sacrificing your well-being in the process. Ella sat very still, her cold coffee forgotten in her hands, as the weight of his offer settled over her like the morning mist rolling in from the ocean. Moonlight filtered through the gauzy curtains of Ella's beach house, casting silvery patterns across her bedroom floor. She lay awake, watching the shadows dance as palm fronds swayed in the coastal breeze. Sleep felt impossible with Noah's words echoing in her mind. Rolling over, she grabbed her phone from the nightstand. 2:37 a.m. She'd been tossing and turning for hours, replaying their conversation on the porch. The way his eyes had lit up when he spoke about the sustainable energy project, the sincerity in his voice when he'd talked about following her career. Ella pushed herself up, adjusting her pillows against the headboard. The gentle sound of waves breaking against the shore drifted through her open window, a rhythm that usually soothed her, but tonight only emphasized her restlessness. Equal stake, equal say, she murmured to herself, testing the words. The offer was generous, more than generous. But was it what she wanted? Just a week ago, she'd been desperate to escape the corporate world, its endless meetings, the constant pressure to perform, to exceed, to succeed. She slipped out of bed, her bare feet silent on the cool wooden floors. In the kitchen, she filled a glass with water, then moved to stand by the window. The moon hung low over the ocean, creating a glittering path across the dark water. Her old life had been suffocating her. The anxiety attacks in her office bathroom, the sleepless nights spent worrying about deadlines, the missed family events, the relationships that had withered from neglect. She'd come here to heal, to find herself again. But Noah's project, it was different, wasn't it? Sustainable energy distribution for rural communities. It was the kind of meaningful work she'd always dreamed of doing. Not just chasing profit margins or market share, but creating real change. Ella wandered into her small home office, where she'd set up a desk facing the ocean. Her laptop sat closed, untouched since she'd arrived. She opened it, the screen's blue light harsh in the darkness. Her fingers moved automatically, pulling up articles about sustainable energy initiatives, rural development projects, and technology integration in underdeveloped areas. Hours passed as she researched, taking notes, following leads. The sky outside began to lighten, pink and orange streaks appearing on the horizon. She'd filled pages with questions, possibilities, concerns. Working with Noah would mean re-entering the corporate world she'd fled from. But maybe, just maybe, she could do it differently this time. Set boundaries, maintain balance. After all, he'd said it would be on her terms. The morning sun was fully risen when Ella finally stepped onto her porch, clutching a fresh cup of coffee. A few early morning joggers passed by on the beach, waving friendly hellos. This peaceful life she'd found here. Did she have to give it up completely to take on Noah's project? She thought about Noah's words again, how he'd noticed her work even before she'd joined Sterling Technologies. All those times she'd felt invisible, pushing herself harder and harder to be seen, and he'd been watching all along, recognizing her potential. Reaching for her phone, Ella pulled up her contacts. Her thumb hovered over Noah's name. The anxiety that had driven her from her old life stirred in her chest, but something else pushed back against it. Curiosity, excitement, possibility. She needed more information before she could make this decision. The project details, the expectations, the structure. She needed to understand it all. And more importantly, she needed to know if this new opportunity could coexist with the peace she'd found here. Taking a deep breath of salt-tinged air, Ella pressed the call button. It rang twice before Noah's voice answered, warm and alert despite the early hour. "Noah? I've been thinking about your offer," she said, her voice steady. "I'd like to meet again, to discuss the details more thoroughly. There are some things I need to understand before I can make a decision." The Bell and Brew Cafe hummed with morning activity as Ella pushed open its weathered blue door. The aroma of fresh coffee and warm pastries wrapped around her like a comfortable blanket. Through the window, she'd spotted Noah already seated at a corner table, his usual polished appearance softened by casual attire. A light blue button-down and khakis that seemed more suited to coastal living than corporate boardrooms. "I hope you don't mind meeting here," Ella said, settling into the chair across from him. "It's become my morning routine." Noah smiled, gesturing to the bustling cafe. "It's perfect. Much better than sterile conference rooms, don't you think?" A young waitress approached with a steaming mug of coffee, Ella's usual order. The owner must have recognized Noah from yesterday and noted their meeting. "Thank you, Sarah," Ella said, warming her hands around the ceramic mug. The familiarity of the moment, being known, having a usual order, reminded her of what she'd gained by leaving her old life behind. Noah pulled out a slim tablet, but didn't immediately open it. Instead, he leaned back, studying her with those intense eyes that had always seemed to see more than others did. "Before we discuss the project," he began, "I want to be clear about something. This isn't about bringing you back to what you left. I watched you push yourself to exhaustion at Sterling, taking on more and more responsibility, never saying no. I should have stepped in sooner." Ella's fingers tightened around her mug. "Why didn't you?" "Because you were exceptional at everything you did. But more than that, you brought humanity to your work. When we were developing the healthcare software division, you were the only executive who insisted on spending time in hospitals, talking to nurses and patients. You saw beyond the profit margins. The memory of those hospital visits surfaced, the conversations with exhausted nurses, the stories from patients struggling with confusing systems. That project needed a human touch, not just efficiency metrics." Noah nodded, finally opening his tablet. "That's exactly why I want you for this new venture. We're developing sustainable energy solutions for rural communities, but it's more than just technology. It's about understanding people's needs, their daily lives, their challenges." He turned the tablet toward her, showing a map dotted with markers. "These are communities still struggling with unreliable power supplies, schools that can't run computers consistently, medical clinics that can't keep vaccines properly refrigerated. We have the technology to help, but we need someone who can see the human side of the equation." Ella studied the map, her mind already spinning with possibilities. "And you're basing this operation here, in this town?" "Yes. No more high-rises or concrete jungles. We'll have a small team, working flexible hours. I've learned my lessons about work-life balance, the hard way." He paused, running a hand through his hair, in an uncharacteristically vulnerable gesture. "I've sacrificed too many relationships to endless meetings and midnight conference calls." The cafe's door chimed as more customers entered. Through the window, Ella could see the ocean, its waves catching the morning light. The peace she'd found here didn't have to end. "I need to know," she said, meeting Noah's gaze directly, "that this won't become another situation where project demands override everything else, where flexible hours turn into always on call. That's why I want you as a partner, not an employee. Equal stake, equal say in how we operate. You've always had better boundaries than I have, Ella. You understand that success isn't just about quarterly reports." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a folder. "These are the initial project outlines. Take them home, review them at your pace. Talk to anyone you need to. I respect whatever decision you make." The sincerity in his voice made Ella pause. This wasn't the driven CEO she remembered from Sterling Technologies. There was something different in his manner, a new awareness that seemed born of his own struggles with balance. "I've always admired how you stood by your principles," Noah continued softly. "Even when it would have been easier to just follow the corporate playbook. Maybe this could be a fresh start for both of us, doing meaningful work without losing ourselves in the process." Ella stood before the weathered brick building, so different from the gleaming skyscrapers she'd left behind. Salt-laden breeze ruffled her hair as seagulls called overhead. The converted warehouse sat 2 blocks from the beach, its large windows reflecting the morning light. Her hands smoothed down her casual blazer. No power suits needed here. She'd chosen comfort over intimidation, paired with jeans that felt more appropriate for the coastal setting. Still, butterflies danced in her stomach as she reached for the door. Noah waited in the lobby, his usual tailored suit replaced by chinos and a light blue button-down. "Ready for the grand tour?" he asked, a warm smile softening his features. The interior surprised her. Instead of sterile white walls and fluorescent lighting, exposed brick and wooden beams created a warm, inviting atmosphere. Large windows let in natural light, and she could hear the distant sound of waves. "We wanted something different," Noah explained, leading her through the open space. "Something that reminded us why we're here." Comfortable seating areas dotted the floor, with clusters of desks arranged to encourage collaboration. Plants thrived in the sunlight, adding life to every corner. "This is Marcus," Noah introduced a young man with bright eyes and an eager smile. "He's our lead engineer for the solar integration systems." "I've heard great things about your work at Sterling," Marcus said, shaking her hand, "especially your approach to the healthcare software rollout." They moved through the office, meeting each team member. Sarah, a local environmental scientist who understood the region's unique challenges. James, who'd left a prestigious firm to work on sustainable energy solutions. Lisa, their community outreach coordinator who'd grown up in one of the rural areas they hoped to help. "Everyone here believes in the mission," Noah explained as they walked. "It's not about quarterly profits or shareholder meetings. It's about making real change." They paused by a wall of windows overlooking the ocean. A wooden conference table sat nearby, surrounded by comfortable chairs. Nothing like the imposing boardroom furniture she remembered. "This is where we have our team meetings," Noah said, running his hand along the table's smooth surface. "We found it at a local craftsman's shop. He made it from reclaimed wood from old fishing boats." Ella touched the wood, feeling the history in its grain. "It's beautiful. Everything here feels so intentional." "That's what we're aiming for. Meaningful work in a meaningful space." Noah's voice softened. "Remember those endless days in the steel and glass tower? Sometimes I'd look out my window and forget what city I was in." "They all started to look the same after a while," Ella agreed. "But here," she gestured to the view. "Here, you always know exactly where you are." A seagull landed on the window ledge, peering in curiously before taking flight again. The sight made both of them smile. "The team usually takes lunch at the beach when weather permits," Noah continued. "Some of our best ideas have come from conversations over sandwiches with our feet in the sand." They walked through the research lab, where Marcus and his team were testing new solar panel configurations. The space hummed with purpose, but without the frantic energy she remembered from her corporate days. "What do you think?" Noah asked as they completed the tour, stopping in what would be her office, a bright corner space with windows on 2 sides. Ella took in the room, already imagining how she might make it her own. "It's different," she said finally, "in all the right ways." "You know," Noah leaned against the doorframe, "yesterday I watched a sunset for the first time in months, actually stopped and watched it, start to finish. Never did that in the city." "This place changes you," Ella nodded. "Makes you notice things again." Through her window, she could see people strolling along the street, unhurried and at ease, so different from the rushed crowds she'd been part of just weeks ago. "Welcome to the team, Ella," Noah said quietly. "I think we might both find what we've been looking for here." Ella sat at her desk, surrounded by market research reports and demographic studies. The morning sun streamed through her office windows, casting a warm glow on the scattered papers. She'd been at her new role for a week now, and already the difference was striking. Her laptop displayed a draft of the project's communication strategy. Instead of focusing solely on profit margins and shareholder value, she found herself writing about community impact and sustainable futures. The words flowed naturally, driven by purpose rather than pressure. "These numbers are fascinating," she muttered, reviewing the local survey results. The coastal community's interest in renewable energy surprised her. They weren't just accepting of change, they were eager for it. A knock on her doorframe pulled her attention away. Sarah, the environmental scientist, stood there with a steaming mug of tea. "Thought you might need this," Sarah said, placing the mug on Ella's desk. "You've been buried in those reports all morning." "Thanks." Ella wrapped her hands around the warm mug. "I'm just trying to understand our audience better. The community here has such a different perspective than what I'm used to." "That's what drew me to this project." Sarah settled into one of the comfortable chairs across from Ella's desk. "People here understand the connection between their lives and the environment. They see the changes in the ocean, the weather patterns." Ella nodded, making notes on her tablet. "It changes how we need to communicate. This isn't about selling an idea. It's about building partnerships." Throughout the morning, Ella moved between meetings with different team members, each conversation adding depth to her understanding. In the research lab, Marcus showed her prototypes of their solar integration systems, explaining technical details in ways that helped her translate them for public consumption. But doubts crept in during quiet moments. Was she falling back into old patterns? Would the pressure build again, stealing her peace? She stepped out onto the office's small balcony, needing a moment of fresh air. The sea breeze carried the salt scent she'd grown to love, grounding her in the present moment. "Penny for your thoughts?" Noah's voice startled her slightly. He stood in the doorway, his expression curious but patient. "Just processing," she replied, turning back to the view. "Everything feels different here, but sometimes I worry. That it's too good to be true?" He moved to stand beside her, maintaining a respectful distance. "I understand that feeling." A comfortable silence settled between them as they watched seabirds wheel overhead. "I'd like to discuss the project's progress," Noah said finally. "Would you join me for dinner? There's a local place that makes amazing seafood. Casual, nothing fancy." Ella hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "That would be helpful. I have some ideas I'd like to run by you anyway." "Great. 7 o'clock? We can walk there from the office." As Noah left, Ella returned to her desk, but her perspective had shifted slightly. She noticed how he'd changed too. The sharp edges of the corporate CEO softened by this place, by this project. The rest of the afternoon passed quickly. Ella refined her communication strategy, incorporating insights from her conversations with the team. She created a framework that emphasized community engagement and transparent dialogue. At 7, she met Noah in the lobby. The evening air was mild, perfect for walking. They fell into step easily, talking about their day as they made their way through the quiet streets. The restaurant was exactly as Noah had described, a weathered building right on the water, strings of lights twinkling overhead. No white tablecloths or formal service, just fresh food and a warm atmosphere. As they settled at a corner table overlooking the harbor, Ella realized how different this felt from their previous professional dinners. No pressure to impress, no hidden agendas, just two people sharing a meal and a vision for something meaningful. Noah looked more relaxed than she'd ever seen him, his usual intensity tempered by the setting. He asked about her ideas, listening intently as she outlined her plans for community engagement. His questions were thoughtful, focused on impact rather than metrics. The office lights dimmed automatically as evening settled in, casting long shadows across the conference room. Ella gathered her papers, ready to head home after a productive day, when Noah appeared in the doorway. "Still here?" he asked, His tie loosened and sleeves rolled up, a far cry from his usual polished appearance. "Just wrapping up some community feedback reports," Ella replied, stifling a yawn. "I lost track of time." Noah lingered in the doorway, then stepped inside. "Would you mind staying a bit longer? There's something I'd like to discuss." Ella nodded, noting the unusual hesitation in his voice. She'd never seen him quite like this before. They settled into the comfortable chairs near the window. The coastal town sparkled below them, nothing like the towering skyscrapers of their previous corporate life, but beautiful in its own way. "You know," Noah began, his fingers drumming absently on the armrest, "when I started my first company, I thought success meant working harder than everyone else. Longer hours, more sacrifice, complete dedication." Ella watched as he stood and walked to the window, his reflection overlaying the twinkling lights below. "It worked," he continued. "Every sacrifice led to another achievement, another milestone. But something strange happened along the way." He turned back to face her. "The more successful I became, the more isolated I felt." The vulnerability in his voice caught Ella off guard. This wasn't the confident CEO she was used to seeing. "The funny thing about success," Noah said, settling back into his chair, "is that people stop seeing you as a person. They see the achievements, the wealth, the position. They don't see the missed family dinners, the lost friendships, the relationships that never had a chance to begin." Ella found herself leaning forward, drawn in by his unexpected openness. "I think I understand that feeling," she said softly. "It's like being trapped in a glass tower. Everyone can see you, but no one can reach you." Exactly. Noah's eyes met hers, recognition flickering between them. "When you handed in your resignation, it was like watching someone break free from that tower. It made me question everything I'd built." He stood again, restless energy radiating from him. "This project isn't just about renewable energy or corporate success. It's about creating something meaningful, something that connects people rather than isolates them." The air felt charged with unspoken emotions as Noah continued. "I've achieved everything I thought I wanted, Ella, but sitting in my penthouse office, surrounded by awards and accolades, I've never felt more alone." His confession hung in the air between them. Ella felt her heart racing, aware of how intimate this moment had become. The professional boundaries they'd carefully maintained were blurring. "The night you quit," he said, his voice quieter now, "I realized I wasn't just losing a valuable executive. I was losing someone who saw through the facade, someone who understood the cost of success because she'd paid it too." Ella's breath caught in her throat, the warmth in his eyes, the rawness of his confession. It stirred something in her she hadn't expected to feel. "Noah, she started. But words failed her. How could she express the conflict she felt? Here was this powerful man, showing her a side of himself few had ever seen. She felt drawn to his vulnerability, his honesty, but the professional relationship they now shared complicated everything. The gentle hum of the building's heating system filled the silence between them. Ella found herself studying his face, noting the tired lines around his eyes that spoke of years of solitude masked by success. Her heart ached for him, even as her mind warned her about the complexities of their situation. The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken possibilities and unacknowledged feelings. Ella felt herself teetering on the edge of something profound, caught between empathy and caution, between personal connection and professional distance. Morning light streamed through the office windows as Ella reviewed project proposals at her desk. The coastal breeze carried the salt-tinged air through her partially opened window, so different from her old high-rise office. A gentle knock drew her attention. "Got a minute?" Noah stood in her doorway, 2 coffee cups in hand. Of course. Ella smiled, noticing he'd remembered her preference for the local coffee shop over the office brew. Noah settled into the chair across from her desk, sliding her cup forward. I wanted to thank you for listening last night. I don't usually... He paused, searching for words. I don't often share that side of myself. Thank you for trusting me, Ella replied, warming her hands around the cup. The intimacy of their late-night conversation still lingered in her mind. Over the next few weeks, their interactions took on a different quality. Their morning meetings stretched longer, conversations flowing naturally from project updates to personal stories. Noah would often share memories of his early days building his company, while Ella found herself opening up about her own journey through the corporate world. One afternoon, as they walked along the beach during lunch, Noah pointed to a small sailboat bobbing in the distance. I used to sail with my father when I was young. It was the only time he truly relaxed. Did you keep sailing? Ella asked, watching his expression soften at the memory. No, he admitted. Always told myself I was too busy. Funny how we let go of the things that bring us joy, isn't it? Ella nodded, understanding all too well. That's partly why I left my old position. I'd forgotten what joy felt like. Their eyes met briefly, and Ella felt that now familiar flutter in her chest. These moments were becoming more frequent, shared glances, comfortable silences, subtle touches that lingered just a moment too long. During project meetings, Ella found herself studying him when he wasn't looking. The way his brow furrowed in concentration, how his hands moved expressively when he spoke passionately about their work. She noticed how he'd softened since their first days working together, his corporate armor gradually giving way to genuine warmth. One morning, Ella arrived at her office to find a surprise waiting on her desk. A small potted plant sat beside a handwritten note. The plant was a coastal variety she'd mentioned admiring during one of their walks. The note read, "To bring a little bit of the beach inside. Thank you for helping make this project feel less like work and more like purpose. Noah." Ella's fingers traced the elegant handwriting, her heart doing that familiar flutter again. The gesture was thoughtful, personal, exactly the kind of thing that made her increasingly confused about their relationship. She glanced through her office window, watching Noah in the conference room. He was gesturing animatedly to their team, his passion for the project evident in every movement. When he caught her eye through the glass, his expression softened into a warm smile. Ella smiled back, even as her mind whirled with questions. The lines between their professional and personal relationship were becoming increasingly blurred. She couldn't deny the growing warmth she felt in his presence, the way their conversations had become the highlight of her days. The small plant on her desk represented more than just a thoughtful gift. It showed how well he'd come to know her, how closely he listened when she spoke. It was the kind of gesture that made her wonder if perhaps he felt the same connection she did. But with that wonder came uncertainty. They were partners in this project, and she'd left her old job specifically to escape the complications of corporate life. Yet here she was, feeling things she hadn't expected to feel for someone she hadn't expected to care about. Ella touched one of the plant's soft leaves, lost in thought. The morning sun caught the dewdrops still clinging to its surface, making them sparkle like tiny stars. Just like the plant, her feelings for Noah had taken root quietly, growing stronger with each passing day. The morning started like any other, with Ella reviewing project reports at her desk. But when Noah burst into the office, his face ashen, she knew something was wrong. "Emergency meeting, conference room now." His voice was clipped, missing its usual warmth. The team gathered quickly, tension thick in the air. Noah stood at the head of the table, his knuckles white as he gripped the back of his chair. "Our main investor is pulling out." The words hit like a physical blow. Ella watched the color drain from her colleagues' faces as Noah continued. They're citing market instability and reducing their risk exposure. We have 2 weeks of operating capital left. The room erupted in worried murmurs. Ella's mind raced through potential solutions, but the numbers were staggering. They needed millions to keep the project afloat. I've already started reaching out to other potential investors, Noah said, his voice tight. But we need to cut expenses immediately. All non-essential spending is frozen. I want proposals for cost reduction on my desk by end of day. Over the next few days, the office atmosphere transformed. Gone were the casual conversations and shared lunches. Noah spent hours locked in his office, phone pressed to his ear, dark circles growing under his eyes. Ella watched him through the glass walls, concern growing as he skipped meals and worked late into the night. The Noah who had shared stories about sailing and brought her thoughtful gifts seemed to have vanished, replaced by a man she barely recognized. During one particularly tense meeting, Noah snapped at a team member over a minor error. Ella saw the hurt look on the employee's face and felt something twist in her chest. This wasn't the leader she'd come to know. We need to revise these projections again, Noah demanded, pacing the conference room. They're not compelling enough for potential investors. The team's been working around the clock, Ella pointed out gently. Maybe we should take a step back, get some fresh perspective. Noah barely glanced at her. We don't have time for breaks. Every minute counts. The days blurred together in a haze of spreadsheets and investor presentations. Ella found herself staying late too, trying to shoulder some of Noah's burden. But he remained distant, absorbed in his own world of financial calculations and emergency meetings. One evening, she noticed his office light still on at 9 o'clock. Through the glass, she could see him sitting at his desk, head in his hands. The sight made her heart ache. Ella knocked softly before entering. I brought you some dinner, she said, placing a container of soup from his favorite cafe on his desk. You need to eat. Thanks, he muttered, not looking up from his laptop. But I need to finish these projections. Noah, she said softly, you're running yourself into the ground. This isn't sustainable. He finally looked at her, his eyes tired and distant. What choice do I have? This project is everything we've worked for. I can't let it fail. We'll figure it out together, Ella assured him. But you need to take care of yourself too. You're not alone in this. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes, a glimpse of the connection they'd shared before the crisis. But then his phone buzzed with another message, and the wall came back up. I appreciate the concern, he said, already turning back to his screen. But I need to focus on finding a solution. We can't afford distractions right now. The dismissal stung, but Ella understood. She'd seen this before, the way stress could transform people, make them retreat into themselves. Still, as she left his office, she couldn't help but worry that they were losing more than just their funding. The soup sat untouched on his desk as Noah continued working, the blue light from his screen casting shadows on his tired face. Ella watched him through the glass, feeling helpless as the man she'd grown to care about disappeared further into his shell, replaced by the weight of their uncertain future. Ella stared at the untouched salad on her desk, her appetite gone. Through the glass walls of her office, she could see Noah in yet another tense phone call, his shoulders rigid as he paced. It had been 2 weeks since the funding crisis began, and things were only getting worse. She watched as he hung up and immediately started dialing another number, not even pausing to take a breath. The sight made her chest tight with worry. This wasn't the same man who'd shown up at her doorstep, who'd shared vulnerable moments over late-night conversations about their hopes and dreams. Their weekly strategy meetings had become cold, clinical affairs. Where they once bounced ideas off each other with easy chemistry, now Noah barely seemed to hear her suggestions. He'd cut her off mid-sentence twice today, his mind already racing to the next problem. These marketing projections need to be completely redone, he'd said earlier, barely glancing at the report she'd spent 3 days preparing. They're not aggressive enough. Noah, we've already pushed the estimates to their realistic limit, she'd tried to explain. Any higher would be... Just make it happen, he'd interrupted, already reaching for his phone as another call came in. Now, sitting in her office, Ella felt the familiar headache building behind her eyes. This was exactly what she'd left her old corporate job to escape. The endless pressure, the disregard for work-life balance, the way people became numbers on a spreadsheet instead of human beings. Sarah, her friend from the local coffee shop, had noticed the change in her during their morning chats. "You look exhausted," she'd said that morning, sliding Ella's usual latte across the counter. "I thought you came here to escape all that corporate stress." Ella sighed, running her fingers through her hair. She'd been so hopeful about this project, about working with Noah. She'd thought it would be different, that they could build something meaningful while maintaining their humanity. But now, a knock on her door startled her from her thoughts. Noah stood there, looking more disheveled than usual. "The investors' meeting is in 10 minutes. Did you revise those projections?" "I sent them an hour ago," she replied, trying to keep the frustration from her voice. "Did you have a chance to review them?" "No time," he said, already turning away. "Just bring them to the meeting." "Noah," she called after him, standing up. "We need to talk about this, about how we're handling things." He paused but didn't turn around. "Not now, Ella. We have to focus on saving the project." "That's all you say anymore," she said quietly. "But what about the people involved? What about us?" For a moment, his shoulders tensed, and she thought she saw a flicker of the old Noah, the one who'd listened, who'd cared. But then his phone buzzed, and the moment was gone. "Meeting? 10 minutes, he repeated, striding away. Ella sank back into her chair, feeling the weight of disappointment settle over her. She pulled out her phone and texted Sarah. "Can we meet for coffee after work? I need to talk." The response came quickly. "Of course. The usual spot at 6? Looking through the glass at Noah, now barking orders at someone else, Ella felt a deep sadness. She'd thought they were building something special, not just the project, but a connection that went deeper than business. Now she wondered if she'd imagined it all. She gathered her papers for the meeting, her mind already drifting to her upcoming conversation with Sarah. Something had to change. She couldn't keep watching Noah self-destruct while their relationship crumbled. She couldn't keep pretending this was the fresh start she'd wanted. The question was, what was she willing to do about it? Growing distance. Ella's bare feet sank into the cool sand as she walked along the shoreline, the gentle waves lapping at her ankles. The morning fog hung low over the beach, creating a cocoon of solitude that matched her mood. 3 days had passed since her argument with Noah, and the words still echoed in her mind. "You're not seeing the bigger picture," he'd shouted, his face flushed with frustration. "We can't afford to be cautious right now. We need to take risks." "And what about the people taking those risks?" she'd fired back. "What about our team who's already working overtime? What about their families, their health?" His laugh had been bitter, dismissive. "This is business, Ella. If you can't handle it—" "Don't!" she'd cut him off, her voice sharp. "Don't you dare suggest I can't handle it. I left my last job because I refused to sacrifice everything for profit. I thought you understood that." Now, watching seagulls circle overhead, Ella wrapped her cardigan tighter around herself. The coastal wind carried the scent of salt and seaweed, reminding her of why she'd chosen this place for her fresh start. Before Noah had shown up at her door, before everything got complicated, she found a quiet spot on a weathered piece of driftwood, and sat down, pulling out her journal. The pages were filled with pros and cons lists, scattered thoughts and questions without answers. Her phone had been buzzing with messages from the office, but she'd turned it off yesterday. She needed this time to think. The project itself was brilliant. She still believed in its potential. Noah's vision for sustainable technology could change lives. But at what cost? She'd watched him transform from the understanding, vulnerable man who'd shared his dreams with her into someone she barely recognized. The pressure was crushing him, and he was letting it happen. A jogger passed by, giving a friendly wave that Ella returned automatically. That was another thing she loved about this town, the simple human connections, the lack of pretense. She'd started to build a life here, making friends like Sarah who actually cared about her well-being rather than her productivity metrics. Ella opened her journal to a fresh page and began to write. What do I really want? To make a difference, to maintain my integrity, to keep my peace of mind, to help Noah see there's another way to not lose myself again. The last point made her pause. That was the heart of it, wasn't it? She'd found herself here, away from the corporate chaos, found her strength, her boundaries. Now she was watching those boundaries blur again, feeling that familiar anxiety creeping back in. But walking away felt wrong too. Not just because of Noah, though the thought of leaving him to self-destruct made her chest ache. It was about the project, about the team they'd built, about the difference they could make if they did it right. A group of dolphins appeared on the horizon, their fins breaking the surface in a graceful dance. Ella watched them, remembering how Noah had once pointed them out during an early morning walk. He'd been different then, more present, more alive. She flipped through her journal, finding the entry from her first week in town. Her words from back then were full of hope, determination to create a life that aligned with her values. She'd written about finding balance, about refusing to be defined by her career. The fog was starting to lift now, revealing more of the coastline. Ella stood up, brushing sand from her clothes. She couldn't keep hiding on this beach forever. She needed to make a decision, not just about the project, but about who she wanted to be. Walking back toward her rental house, Ella felt the first stirrings of clarity. She could stay and fight for what she believed in, try to show Noah another way of leading. Or she could leave, protect the peace she'd found here. But whatever she chose, she wouldn't compromise her core values again. She wouldn't lose herself in someone else's vision, no matter how much she cared about them. Ella's heels clicked against the polished floor of the office building, each step purposeful. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the empty workspace. It was early, too early for most of the staff, but she knew Noah would be here. He was always here. Her hand trembled slightly as she approached his office door. Through the glass, she could see him hunched over his desk, tie loosened, surrounded by stacks of papers and empty coffee cups. The sight was so familiar it hurt. She knocked softly before entering. Noah looked up, dark circles under his eyes betraying his exhaustion. "Ella," he said, straightening. "I didn't expect you back so soon." "We need to talk," she said, closing the door behind her. The quiet hum of the building's air conditioning filled the silence between them. Noah gestured to the chair across from his desk, but Ella remained standing. "Not like this," she said. "Not with a desk between us. Please." After a moment's hesitation, he stood and moved to the seating area near the window. Ella followed, settling into one of the leather chairs, while Noah took the couch opposite her. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "About why I left my last job, about what brought me to that coastal town, and about what made me agree to join this project." Noah leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Ella, if this is about the funding crisis, it's about more than that, she interrupted. It's about watching history repeat itself. It's about watching you destroy yourself the same way I almost did. She paused, gathering her thoughts. And it's about us. The last words hung in the air between them. Noah's expression softened slightly, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. I came back because I believed in your vision, she continued, because I saw someone who understood the importance of balance, who valued people over profit. But lately, she gestured at his disheveled appearance, the mess of papers on his desk. Lately, I feel like I'm losing you to the same corporate machine I ran away from. We're facing a critical moment, Noah defended, running a hand through his hair. The project needs a leader who's not running on caffeine and stress, Ella cut in. It needs someone who can think clearly, who can inspire the team instead of driving them into the ground. She leaned forward, meeting his eyes. And I need the Noah who showed up at my door that day, who talked about changing the world without sacrificing our souls in the process. Noah was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the city skyline. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. I didn't realize. I've been so focused on not failing that I forgot why we started this in the first place. It's not just about the project, Ella said softly. Whatever's growing between us, this connection we have, it's getting lost in the chaos. I feel like I'm losing myself again, and I'm losing you before I ever really had you. Noah turned back to her, and for the first time in weeks, she saw real emotion in his eyes. I'm sorry, he said, the words coming out barely above a whisper. I got caught up in old habits, old fears. The last thing I wanted was to push you away. I know, Ella replied, but knowing isn't enough. We need to find a better way forward. For the project, for the team, and for us. Noah nodded slowly. You're right. I've been handling this all wrong. He reached across the space between them, taking her hand. I don't want to lose what we have. Ella, I don't want to lose you. Then help me find a balance, she said, squeezing his hand. Show me that change is possible. I will, he promised. We'll figure this out together. But as they sat there, hands clasped in the early morning light, Ella couldn't quite silence the whisper of doubt in her mind. Promises were easy to make in moments of clarity. It was keeping them that proved challenging. Only time would tell if Noah could truly change his ways, or if they were both destined to get lost in the undertow of corporate ambition. Ella sat at her desk, reviewing project reports when a gentle knock interrupted her focus. Noah stood in the doorway, more relaxed than she'd seen him in weeks. His usual tailored suit was replaced by a casual button-down and slacks. Got a minute? He asked, a small smile playing at his lips. She nodded, curious about his changed demeanor. Of course. I've been thinking about our conversation, Noah said, settling into the chair across from her. And you were right. I've made some decisions. He placed a folder on her desk. I'm stepping back from day-to-day operations for a while. Ella's eyes widened. What do you mean? I've appointed Sarah from operations as interim CEO. She'll handle the daily management while I focus on the bigger picture. He leaned forward, his expression earnest. And on us. Noah, Ella began, but he held up a hand. Let me finish. I've spent years building companies, chasing success, but I've never taken the time to build real connections. When you confronted me about my behavior, it hit home. Hard. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she'd come to recognize as vulnerability. I don't want to be that person anymore. Over the next few weeks, Noah kept his word. They established regular check-ins with the team, but made sure to leave the office at reasonable hours. Noah suggested they explore the coastal town together, rediscovering the charm that had drawn Ella there in the first place. One evening, They walked along the beach as the sun painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. "I never took time for this before," Noah admitted, watching the waves crash against the shore. "Always thought it was a waste of productive hours." Ella smiled, remembering her own journey. "That's exactly why I came here. Sometimes the most productive thing you can do is just be." They stopped at a small cafe they'd discovered, ordering coffee and settling into a quiet corner table. "The team's quarterly report came in today," Noah mentioned, stirring his drink. "Sarah's doing an excellent job." "She is," Ella agreed, "and the project's actually moving faster now that people aren't burning themselves out." Noah nodded thoughtfully. "I've been learning a lot from watching her lead. She has this way of motivating people without pushing them to the breaking point." He looked at Ella meaningfully. "Something I should have learned from you earlier." Their conversations grew deeper, more personal. Noah shared stories about his early days building his first company, the mistakes he'd made, the relationships he'd sacrificed. Ella opened up about her own struggles with perfectionism and the fear of failure that had driven her to exhaustion. During a strategy meeting the following week, Ella noticed the difference in their dynamic. She felt more confident presenting her ideas, knowing Noah would listen with genuine interest rather than just waiting to respond. The pressure to prove herself had eased, replaced by a natural flow of collaboration. "I've been thinking about implementing a new policy," Ella said as they reviewed project timelines. "Mandatory disconnect hours. No emails or calls after 7 p.m. unless it's truly urgent." Instead of dismissing it as impractical, Noah considered it carefully. "That could work. We could start with a pilot program, maybe 3 months to test the impact on productivity and employee satisfaction." "Really?" Ella couldn't hide her surprise. Noah smiled. "A few months ago, I would have said it was impossible. But now?" He gestured to the stack of positive performance reports on the table. "The evidence speaks for itself. Happy, well-rested employees do better work." As they wrapped up the meeting, Noah suggested they take a walk through the nearby park. The afternoon sun filtered through the trees as they discussed ways to maintain this new balance they'd found. "What if we set up regular team retreats?" Ella suggested. "Not those intense corporate workshops, but actual time for people to connect and recharge." "I like that," Noah agreed. "We could use my beach house up the coast, make it quarterly, focus on team building and creativity." Ella felt a warmth spread through her chest. This was the Noah she'd glimpsed that first day at her door. Thoughtful, open to new ideas, capable of change. Their relationship had evolved into something deeper, built on mutual understanding and respect. As they walked, they continued brainstorming ways to make the project successful while nurturing the personal connections that made it meaningful. The future felt full of possibilities, not just for the company, but for them as well. The morning sun streamed through the project office's large windows as Ella reviewed the latest organizational charts. She'd spent the weekend redesigning the company structure, determined to create something more sustainable. The sound of footsteps made her look up to find Noah approaching, 2 cups of coffee in hand. "I thought you might need this," he said, placing 1 cup on her desk. "You've been at it since dawn." "Thanks." Ella smiled, accepting the coffee. "But don't worry, I'm not overworking, just excited about these changes." Noah pulled up a chair beside her desk, close enough that she could smell his subtle cologne. "Show me what you've got." Ella spread out the diagrams across her desk. "See, instead of the traditional hierarchy, I'm thinking we implement rotating team leads. It prevents burnout and gives everyone a chance to develop leadership skills." Noah studied the charts intently, his brow furrowed in concentration. "This is different from anything we've done before." "That's the point," Ella said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "The old way wasn't working. We needed something new." They spent the next hour discussing the details, debating the pros and cons of various approaches. Noah surprised her by being receptive to even her most unconventional ideas. "What about implementing mandatory vacation days?" she suggested. "Not just offering them, but requiring people to take them." "Including me?" Noah asked, a hint of amusement in his voice. "Especially you," Ella replied firmly. As they worked, their conversation flowed naturally between professional and personal topics. Noah shared stories about his early career mistakes, while Ella talked about her own journey to recognizing the importance of balance. "I used to think success meant sacrificing everything else," Noah admitted, leaning back in his chair. "Relationships, health, happiness, they all seemed secondary to building the company." Ella noticed the regret in his voice. "And now?" Noah's eyes met hers, intense and sincere. "Now I realize I was wrong. Working with you these past few months has shown me there's another way." They moved to the conference room, spreading their materials across the larger table. As they worked on implementing the new structure, Ella couldn't help but notice how different Noah seemed. The sharp edges of his corporate persona had softened, revealing someone more thoughtful and considerate. "We should present this to the team," Ella suggested, gathering their notes. "Get their input before we finalize anything." "Agreed," Noah said. "Why don't we organize a team lunch? Make it casual, encourage open discussion?" Ella smiled, remembering how the old Noah would have simply issued directives from above. "That's perfect." As they prepared for the team meeting, Noah suddenly grew quiet. Ella noticed him watching her as she arranged the presentation materials. "Something on your mind?" she asked. Noah took a deep breath, as if gathering courage. "Ella, I need to tell you something." He moved closer, his voice soft but clear. "Working with you hasn't just changed how I view the company. It's changed how I view everything. My priorities, my goals." He paused, meeting her eyes. "The person I want to be." Ella's heart quickened as Noah continued. "I've grown to care about you deeply, more than I thought possible. And I want you to know that these changes we're making, they're not just for the company. I'm willing to change my whole approach to work and life for you." The sincerity in his voice made Ella's breath catch. Noah stood before her, no longer the intimidating CEO who'd appeared at her door months ago, but a man who'd learned to balance ambition with humanity. "I know I still have a lot to learn," he added softly. "But I'm committed to doing better, being better, if you'll help me." The setting sun painted the coastal town in warm hues as Ella walked along the beach, her shoes dangling from one hand. The gentle waves lapped at her feet, a rhythm that had become familiar during her morning walks. She'd come here to think, to weigh the decision that had been keeping her awake at night. Behind her, the project office's modern building stood in stark contrast to the town's quaint architecture. It represented everything she'd tried to escape months ago: deadlines, responsibilities, corporate pressure. Yet something felt different now. The same building also held promise, change, and most importantly, Noah. Ella stopped to watch a seagull dive into the water. The peaceful scene reminded her of her first days here, when she'd imagined a simpler life. She'd pictured herself opening a small bookstore, maybe doing freelance work from home. The dream still appealed to her, but it felt incomplete now. She found herself at the small coffee shop where she and Noah often met. Sarah, the owner, waved her in. "The usual?" Sarah asked, already reaching for a mug. "Thanks," Ella smiled, settling into her favorite corner spot. "Actually, I could use some advice." Sarah brought over the coffee and pulled up a chair. "Let me guess. Torn between staying and going?" "Is it that obvious?" Ella wrapped her hands around the warm mug. "Honey, I've watched you and Noah transform from stressed-out city folks to actual human beings," Sarah chuckled. "But lately you've had that look again, like you're carrying the weight of the world." "The project is different now," Ella admitted. "Noah's different. We've created something that could actually change how companies approach work-life balance, but you're afraid of losing yourself again," Sarah finished. Ella nodded. "Exactly. What if we succeed and everything goes back to the way it was? What if Noah reverts to his old habits?" "From what I've seen," Sarah said thoughtfully, "that man would move mountains to keep from disappointing you." The coffee shop door chimed, and Noah himself walked in. He spotted Ella and paused, clearly sensing she needed space. "Join me?" Ella called out, making her decision. Noah ordered his coffee and sat across from her as Sarah discreetly moved away. For a moment, they sat in comfortable silence. "I knew I'd find you here," Noah said finally. "You come here when you're making big decisions." "You know me well," Ella admitted. "I've been thinking about everything. The project, the team, us." Noah leaned forward, his expression serious. "Whatever you decide, I want you to know something. The changes we've made, they're permanent. Whether you stay or go, I won't go back to being the person I was." "How can you be sure?" Ella asked, voicing her deepest fear. "Because I've learned what really matters," Noah replied. "Success isn't just about profit margins anymore. It's about creating something meaningful while protecting what's important: our people, our relationships, our peace of mind." Ella studied him, noting the sincerity in his eyes. "I want to stay," she said slowly. "But I need to know my boundaries will be respected. No more 60-hour weeks. No more sacrificing personal time for corporate emergencies." "What exactly are you proposing?" Noah asked, looking intrigued. "I'll help lead the project, but on my terms. I want to maintain my morning walks, my evenings free, and my weekends sacred. We'll create a structure that allows everyone, including you, to have a real life outside of work." Noah's face broke into a genuine smile. "I wouldn't want it any other way. Your perspective, your insistence on balance, it's what makes you valuable not just to the project, but to me. And if things start slipping back into old patterns, then you have my full permission to drag me out of the office and throw me into the ocean." Noah grinned, then grew serious. "I mean it, Ella. You've shown me a better way to live. I'm not letting that go." Ella felt the last of her doubts dissolving. The quiet life she'd dreamed of didn't have to mean giving up everything she'd built. Perhaps it was about finding the right balance, the right partner, and the right cause to believe in. Ella stood at the front of the conference room, her confidence radiating as she addressed the team. The morning sunlight streamed through the windows, casting a warm glow over the gathered faces. These weren't just employees anymore. They were partners in something revolutionary. "3 months ago we faced a crisis," she began, glancing at Noah, who stood quietly at the back of the room. "But instead of falling back on old habits of endless overtime and burnout, we tried something different." The projector displayed their latest results. Productivity had increased by 30% since implementing their new work structure. More importantly, employee satisfaction scores had doubled. "By respecting personal time and maintaining boundaries, we've proven that success doesn't require sacrifice," Ella continued. "Each of you has contributed to this achievement while having time for your families, your hobbies, and yourselves." Sarah from marketing raised her hand. "The 4-day workweek experiment was scary at first, but my team's actually delivering better results now." "Exactly," Noah stepped forward, joining Ella at the front. "We're not just creating another tech product. We're demonstrating a new way of working." The energy in the room was electric. Team members shared stories of how the changes had affected their lives. David had finally started taking guitar lessons, Maria had time to coach her daughter's soccer team, and James had written half his novel. After the meeting, Ella and Noah walked through the office. The space had transformed over the past months. Gone were the stark corporate decorations, replaced by plants, comfortable seating areas, and even a small meditation room. The walls featured local artists' work, bringing the coastal town's creativity into their workspace. "Remember when you first showed up at my door?" Ella asked, pausing by the window that overlooked the beach. Noah chuckled. "I was terrified you'd slam it in my face. I probably deserved it." "You've changed since then," she observed. "We both have." "For the better, I hope," he replied, his hand finding hers. They watched as their team members headed out for lunch, some to the beach, others to local cafes. No one rushed through their breaks anymore. The culture of constant hurry had been replaced by mindful productivity. The afternoon brought the final preparations for their product launch. Ella led a marketing strategy session, but unlike the marathon meetings of their past, this one had clear boundaries. 2 hours maximum, with regular breaks and focused objectives. "The media's already picking up on our story," their PR director reported. "They're fascinated by how we've maintained top-tier performance while prioritizing work-life balance. Several major publications want to feature us." Noah leaned back in his chair, looking satisfied. "Let them see it's possible. Maybe other companies will follow suit." As the day wound down, Ella walked through the quiet office. Most of the team had left, on time, as usual. A few were finishing up projects, but there was no pressure to stay late. The sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, a daily reminder of why they'd chosen this location. The product launch event was scheduled for tomorrow morning. Everything was ready. The platform tested, the marketing materials polished, the press releases prepared. But unlike previous launches in her career, Ella felt calm. They'd done this right, taking the time to build something sustainable. Noah appeared in her office doorway. "Ready to call it a day?" "Almost," she smiled. "Just reviewing tomorrow's schedule one last time." "The old me would have kept you here all night, triple-checking everything," he admitted. "And the old me would have let you," she replied, standing up and gathering her things. "But we know better now." As they walked out together, they passed the wall where their company values hung. At the top, in bold letters, "Success through balance." It wasn't just a slogan. They'd proven it was possible. The evening breeze carried the salt scent of the ocean as they left the building. Several team members were gathered at the beach volleyball court they'd installed last month, enjoying a casual game before heading home. The scene perfectly captured what they'd built, a place where work and life didn't just balance, but enhanced each other. "We did it," Ella said softly, watching the scene before them. "We actually did it." "No," Noah corrected her, squeezing her hand. "We're doing it. Every day we're showing it's possible to succeed without sacrificing what matters most." The project would launch tomorrow, but their real achievement was already evident in the happy faces around them and the peaceful satisfaction in their own hearts. The morning sun cast golden rays across the coastal waters as Ella and Noah walked barefoot along the shoreline. They'd decided to take the day off after yesterday's successful project launch, leaving their capable team to handle the initial feedback and press responses. Ella wore a flowing sundress that danced in the sea breeze, while Noah had traded his usual business attire for casual shorts and a light linen shirt. The transformation wasn't just in their clothing. Their entire demeanor had shifted from the tense executives they once were. "Look what the tide brought in," Ella said, bending down to pick up a perfectly formed sand dollar. The white disk was intact, its intricate pattern unmarred by the ocean's journey. Noah watched her with a soft smile. "Remember when you used to collect spreadsheets instead of seashells?" "Don't remind me," she laughed, tucking the sand dollar into her beach bag. "Though I have to admit, I don't miss those late-night number-crunching sessions." They continued their walk, stopping occasionally to examine interesting shells or watch seabirds dive for their breakfast. The beach was quiet this early, with only a few joggers and dog walkers sharing the expansive shoreline. "I packed us breakfast," Noah said, gesturing to the wicker basket he carried. "Nothing fancy, just some fresh fruit, pastries from that little bakery you love, and coffee." They found a perfect spot to spread their blanket, just beyond where the highest waves could reach. The sound of gentle surf created a peaceful backdrop as they settled in for their morning meal. Ella poured coffee from a thermos, while Noah arranged the breakfast spread. Fresh strawberries glistened in the morning light, and the smell of still warm croissants filled the air. "Sometimes I can't believe this is real," Ella admitted, taking a sip of her coffee. "A year ago, I was drowning in stress, convinced that success meant sacrificing everything else." Noah reached over and squeezed her hand. "I was worse. I thought I had it all figured out, but I was just running from one achievement to the next, never stopping to appreciate anything, or anyone." They ate in comfortable silence, watching the waves roll in and out. A group of dolphins appeared in the distance, their fins breaking the surface as they played in the morning waters. "Want to walk to the tide pools?" Noah suggested, after they'd finished breakfast. "The morning low tide usually reveals some interesting marine life." They packed up their breakfast things and made their way across the beach to where rocky formations created natural pools of seawater. Tiny fish darted around in the clear water, and sea anemones waved their tentacles gently. Ella crouched down to examine a starfish clinging to the rocks. "It's amazing how these little ecosystems find their balance," she observed. "Everything has its place, its rhythm." "Just like we found ours," Noah replied, joining her by the tide pool. They spent the next hour exploring the rocky area, discovering hermit crabs, sea urchins, and even a small octopus that quickly changed colors before disappearing into a crevice. As the sun climbed higher, they returned to their blanket, now settling under a large beach umbrella Noah had brought. The beach was beginning to fill with more people, but their spot remained peaceful and private. "I got a message from the team earlier," Noah mentioned, scrolling briefly through his phone before putting it away again. "The launch is going perfectly. They've got everything under control." "And you're not tempted to check in?" Ella teased. "Surprisingly, no," he replied, lying back on the blanket. "I trust them. Plus, I'm exactly where I want to be." Ella joined him, resting her head on his shoulder as they watched the clouds drift by. The rhythmic sound of waves mixed with distant children's laughter and calling seabirds created a perfect symphony of beach life. "We've come so far," Ella mused, feeling completely at peace. "Not just with the project, but with ourselves." Noah pulled her closer, and they lay there together, content in the knowledge that they'd found something far more valuable than just professional success. They'd discovered a way to have both: achievement and peace, ambition and balance, success and happiness. The gentle breeze carried the salt spray around them as they shared this quiet moment, knowing that while their journey wasn't over, they'd finally found their perfect rhythm together. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the beach as Ella and Noah walked along the shoreline. The water lapped gently at their feet, and the salty breeze carried away the last remnants of their earlier stress. They'd been quiet for a while, both lost in their own thoughts after their peaceful morning. "I've been thinking," Ella said, breaking the comfortable silence. She stopped walking and turned to face the ocean, watching the waves roll in. "About where we go from here." Noah stood beside her, his shoulders relaxed in a way she'd never seen during their corporate days. "The project? Or us?" "Both, I guess." She picked up a smooth stone and turned it over in her hands. "The team's doing amazing work, and the launch exceeded our expectations, but I keep wondering what's next." "I used to always have a 5-year plan," Noah admitted, running a hand through his wind-tousled hair. Every milestone mapped out, every goal quantified. It drove everyone around me crazy. Ella smiled, remembering the countless strategy meetings where Noah had insisted on detailed projections and backup plans for their backup plans. And now? Now? He picked up his own stone and skipped it across the water. Now I'm learning that some of the best things in life can't be planned or charted on a spreadsheet. They watched the stone bounce 4 times before disappearing beneath the surface. A flock of seagulls swooped overhead, their calls echoing across the beach. I want to expand the project, Ella said, but not like we would have done before. Not with impossible deadlines and burnout-inducing schedules. I want to grow it organically, create something sustainable. Noah nodded, understanding in his eyes. I've been thinking about that too. What if we focused on building a company culture that actually values work-life balance? Not just as a buzzword in HR meetings, but as a fundamental principle. Lead by example? Ella asked, raising an eyebrow. Exactly. Noah's face lit up with enthusiasm. We could implement flexible working hours, mandatory vacation time, wellness programs that people actually use. Show them that success doesn't have to come at the cost of personal happiness. They resumed walking, their footprints leaving parallel trails in the wet sand. The beach was emptying as the day wound down, families packing up their umbrellas and coolers, heading home for dinner. And us? Ella asked softly. Where do we fit into all of this? Noah stopped walking and turned to face her. I think we're proof that sometimes the best things happen when you let go of rigid plans. When I showed up at your door that day, I had a whole speech prepared about the project, about business opportunities. I never expected to find something more important. Ella finished for him. Exactly. He took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. I spent years thinking success meant checking boxes on a to-do list, meeting targets, closing deals, expanding market share. But being here, with you, has shown me what real success feels like. Ella squeezed his hand. I was so afraid of losing myself again in the corporate world, of getting caught up in the endless cycle of meetings and deadlines and forgetting to actually live. And now? Now I know it's possible to have both, to be ambitious without being consumed by ambition, to care about work without letting it become everything. She looked up at him. But I think we need to take it slow, figure things out as we go. Noah nodded, a soft smile playing at his lips. One day at a time? One day at a time, she agreed. No 5-year plans, no rigid timelines. Just us, growing together, seeing where this journey takes us. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. They stood there together, watching the colors reflect off the water, neither feeling the need to rush or plan or control what came next. I like that idea, Noah said finally. Taking things as they come, prioritizing what really matters. Ella leaned into him, feeling the steady beat of his heart. We've already proven we make a good team, both in business and everything else. The morning sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of their coastal office, casting warm patches of light across the conference room table. Ella sat beside Noah, both of them reviewing project proposals spread out before them. The atmosphere was different now, calmer, more balanced, without the frenetic energy that had once defined their working relationship. What do you think about the wellness initiative? Ella asked, sliding a document toward Noah. I've been working on incorporating mental health support and flexible scheduling into our company culture. Noah leaned back in his chair, studying the proposal with genuine interest. His tie was loosened and his sleeves rolled up, a far cry from the rigid CEO she'd known in their previous corporate life. This is exactly what we talked about on the beach, he said, a smile touching his lips. Creating real change, not just empty promises. I thought we could start with a pilot program, Ella explained, pointing to a specific section. 4-day work weeks for the development team. See how it affects productivity and employee satisfaction. Noah nodded, making notes in the margin. Let's expand it. Not just the dev team. Let's include marketing and operations too, a company-wide experiment. They worked through the morning, breaking occasionally to walk along the beach path outside their office. During one such break, Ella noticed how naturally they'd fallen into this new rhythm, discussing business strategies while watching waves crash against the shore, making decisions without the weight of corporate pressure crushing their spirits. Remember when we used to think success meant working ourselves to exhaustion? Ella mused, watching a pair of pelicans dive for fish. Noah chuckled, his hand finding hers as they walked. I remember thinking you were crazy when you first quit. Now I understand you were just braver than the rest of us. Back in the office, they met with their team to discuss upcoming projects. The conference room had a different energy now. Gone were the tense shoulders and anxious glances. Instead, team members spoke freely, sharing ideas and concerns without fear of judgment. We've got 3 potential ventures to consider, Ella addressed the group, standing at the whiteboard. But we're going to approach them differently than we would have in the past. No impossible deadlines, no expectation of overnight miracles. Noah stepped forward, adding his perspective. We're building something sustainable here. That means taking care of our team is just as important as meeting our goals. As the meeting concluded, team members filtered out with genuine smiles, chatting about both work and personal lives. Ella watched them go, feeling a sense of pride in what they'd created. Not just a successful business, but a healthy environment where people could thrive. Later that afternoon, Ella and Noah sat in their shared office, reviewing the day's progress. The space reflected their new approach to work-life balance. Comfortable seating areas for casual discussions, large windows offering views of nature, and no oppressive overhead fluorescent lighting. The team's quarterly results came in, Noah said, passing Ella his tablet. We're actually performing better with the reduced hours and flexible scheduling. Ella scrolled through the data, noting the improvements in both productivity and employee retention. It proves what we've been saying all along. Happy people do better work. They spent the rest of the afternoon finalizing plans for their next project launch. But unlike before, there was no sense of desperate urgency, no sacrifice of personal well-being for professional gain. Instead, they worked with focused enthusiasm, taking breaks when needed, and maintaining their connection throughout. As evening approached, they gathered the team for a small celebration of their recent successes. The office kitchen was filled with laughter and conversation as people shared stories and snacks. Ella watched Noah chatting with a group of developers, his genuine interest in their lives outside of work evident in his expression. We did it, she said when he joined her by the windows. We actually found a way to make it work, all of it. Noah's eyes met hers, full of warmth and understanding. We're just getting started, he replied, raising his glass in a quiet toast. To building something that matters, the right way. Around them, their team continued celebrating, the atmosphere full of joy and possibility. Through the windows, the setting sun painted the ocean in brilliant colors, a reminder of the beauty that existed beyond office walls, beauty they could now fully appreciate, thanks to the balance they'd found together. The sun painted the coastal sky in brilliant oranges and pinks as Ella and Noah walked barefoot along the sandy beach. The gentle waves lapped at their feet, and a cool breeze carried the salty scent of the ocean. Ella's sundress fluttered in the wind as Noah's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining naturally. Remember my first week here? Ella asked, watching seabirds circle overhead. I was so determined to leave everything behind. Noah squeezed her hand gently. And then I showed up at your door, probably the last person you wanted to see. His eyes crinkled with amusement as he recalled that day. I nearly slammed the door in your face, Ella admitted with a laugh. They paused their walk, and she bent down to pick up a perfectly formed shell. But something told me to listen. The beach stretched before them, nearly empty as day turned to evening. A few distant figures walked their dogs or jogged along the shoreline, but this section of beach felt like their own private sanctuary. You changed everything, Noah said softly, watching the sunset's reflection dance across the water. Not just for me, but for everyone at the company. You showed us there was a better way. Ella turned the shell over in her free hand, thinking about their journey. We changed it together. I had the idea, but you had the courage to implement it. Not many CEOs would completely restructure their company based on work-life balance. They continued their walk, letting the cool water wash over their feet. The sound of waves provided a peaceful backdrop to their conversation. The team meeting today, Noah mused, watching everyone share ideas, seeing how relaxed and creative they've become. It's everything I didn't know I wanted for the company. And for yourself, Ella added, looking up at him. The tension that had once seemed permanently etched in his features was gone, replaced by a peaceful contentment that made him look years younger. They reached their favorite spot on the beach, where a natural formation of rocks created a perfect sitting area. Noah helped Ella up, and they settled side by side, their shoulders touching. I used to think success meant sacrificing everything else, Noah admitted, his voice barely audible above the waves. Relationships, health, happiness, it all seemed secondary to building the business. Ella leaned her head against his shoulder, watching as the sun began its final descent toward the horizon. And now I know that true success is this, he gestured to the beach, to their intertwined hands, to the peaceful evening surrounding them. Being able to build something meaningful while still having time to watch the sunset. The sky darkened to deep purple and blue, stars beginning to peek through the twilight. A cool breeze picked up, and Noah wrapped his arm around Ella's shoulders, pulling her closer. Do you ever miss the old life? He asked. The high-rise office? The constant rush? Ella shook her head, snuggling closer into his embrace. Not for a second. This is where I belong, where we belong. They sat in comfortable silence, watching as the last sliver of sun disappeared below the horizon. The evening stars reflected off the water, creating a mirror of light that stretched toward infinity. Noah turned to face Ella, his eyes soft with emotion. Thank you, he said simply, for showing me what matters. Ella reached up to touch his face, her fingers gentle against his cheek. No words were needed as they shared this quiet moment, the sound of waves and the evening breeze enveloping them in their own private world. The darkness settled around them like a comfortable blanket, the moon casting a silver path across the water. In this peaceful moment, they both knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, stronger for having found this balance between ambition and peace, success and happiness, work and love.